Okay, full disclosure here. I have already taken this thing apart and ordered the parts that I needed, but I wanted to make sure that this video is as complete as possible to help somebody who wants to do this job. In the very beginning, I was very intimidated by this, mainly because this is the biggest piece of equipment I've ever worked on. This is a 2006 Chevy c4500 dump truck, 6.6 Duramax, and it was intimidating. However, after having taken it apart, it's not that bad. So the reason why I want to do this is to help somebody and show a couple of things that I discovered on this that will hopefully help. And I see this particular repair as an extreme case, and I say that because of how badly rusted everything is. I believe I have other footage that shows just how bad the rust is on this thing, especially with these rotors. This one isn't as bad as the other one, but the other one is actually split in half from the amount of corrosion in there. But the calipers are extremely bad. Everything about this is just very, very corroded. So I just want to explain how I went about doing this. There were a couple videos on YouTube that I found. However, the one dude had a lot of good information, but his video, it was just very hard to follow and look at and understand. So here's what I've discovered. Let's get into it. Number one is this thing right here. This is the axle shaft. On the axle shaft, you're going to have three pieces. Let me take it. Three pieces. You got your nut, a washer, and then here, I believe GM calls this a dowel. Other people call it a cone washer, a cone nut, etc. It goes into the axle shaft bolt hole. It sits in there because that groove is tapered, just like this dowel is, and it'll compress itself in there when you tighten down the nut and the washer. Helps it all stay together. In order to get that dowel out, it's going to be sitting flush with the surface of the outer axle shaft plate. So you got to get yourself a sledgehammer. This is like a little 3-pound sledgehammer, and you can't be afraid to hit that plate. This is a nice thick solid piece of metal. You're not going to hurt it unless you're absolutely putting everything you have behind it, but you got to hit it. Right? You see how that vibrates back? That action of vibrating back and forth will pop the dowel out. And whenever you're hitting that, you want to make sure that all your nuts are on each stud, because if you end up missing that and you hit the threads, you're going to jack up the bolt, and then you'll have that to replace. So keep the nuts on and smack it really good. I was hitting it on the side, and I was hitting it in the center to get them to come out. Mine would not pop out. People were saying, you know, you hit the center, they'll pop out. Mine wouldn't do that. So I actually had to get a pair of channel locks and grip the very end of this, and I had to screw it off just like it was a nut. But it's not a nut. There are no threads in there. It should just slide right off, but if it doesn't, you'll get it out. All right, next, there was a lot of sealant around this particular axle shaft. Some kind of silicone or RTV, I don't know what it is. It was actually squished out around all the studs. So apparently this was done before. But anyway, so axle shaft is now loose, and now you can pull this out. This axle shaft extends from here to the middle of your differential. So when you pull this out, when this comes apart, you're going to have a little bit of oil come out from the differential. Have your bucket there, catch the little bit of oil. It's not a lot, it's very, very minimal. So we'll go ahead and slide the axle shaft out very carefully. And there it is. All the splines look good. So there we go. So we'll put this away for safekeeping. All right, axle shaft is out. Now we can see the outer bearing. This is the big old nut that holds the whole thing together. And to get that big old nut off, you need a big old socket. This is the 8-point 3 1/4 right there. And you can use that to take that nut off. Just like so. And out pops that assembly. On the passenger side of the vehicle, this came out as one piece. On the driver's side, this came apart. The nut was separated from this. So that's the next piece. After that, you'll have, there we go, you have your bearing. That's the outer bearing. Now at this point, you are totally clear on the inside with the exception of the inner bearing. However, that will come off with the hub and rotor. Next up will be the caliper. With the caliper on, it's not coming off because the hub and the rotor are bolted together, one piece. So you have to get the caliper out. Let's talk about that caliper. All right, the caliper was a little bit of a pain in that I did not have the necessary tool to take that caliper off. It's an 1 3/16 bolt that holds it on. It's the same size as the wheel studs. 1 3/16 or 30 millimeter. That's the same size. And what I did was I couldn't get my impact back here, and I couldn't get a socket and ratchet back here because of the block for the leaf spring pack. So what I did was went online and I bought a striking wrench. So there is the Proto 1 3/16 striking wrench. And when I was looking at striking wrenches, I didn't expect much. I've heard of them, but I've never seen one before, and this one is stout. I was worried about hitting it and it bending and breaking. After using it, I do not have that fear anymore. So this is good. The only thing I would do differently is I would try more earnestly to find a 6-point striking wrench vice the 12. It worked. I had no problem. It did not strip the bolt out. It worked flawlessly. So in my case, it did not strip the bolt. And I do consider this, like I said, an extreme case with the rust and corrosion. So it worked. It did its job. I don't even think it came close to stripping it. So the striking wrench was on there like so, and then you simply take your hammer and whack on it, and it knocks it loose, and she comes right off. The bottom bolt that holds the caliper on, it came off no problem. I could wedge my impact in there, and I got it off. The other part on the caliper is the banjo bolt. At the bottom here, simply remove that. I don't remember the size of that, 9/16 I think. Take off the banjo bolt, and now once you have both of the 1 3/16 caliper bolts out. Now you can take your caliper off and continue on. Caliper's off. Everything is out of the way to remove the whole hub and rotor assembly off of the axle. And this is heavy, it's quite heavy. When you pull it out, I had a little bit of play in mind where it would just come out a little bit and go back and forth. I used my sledge on the back side of the rotor to just tap a little bit to get that rotor to come off, the bearing off the shaft, and it popped right off. So you might have to do that. So you should hold from the bottom as much as you can and then pull out. And be nice and gentle, don't mess up any of the threads. And there you go. And now you can see the hub portion and the rotor. If you're doing this, you have to know, let me flip it over. You have to know how many bolts you have in the back. So in this case, I have 10 bolts, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 bolts for the rotor. Those bolts you unloosen, and then your hub which is from these studs back to here, is one piece. They'll separate from the rotor. So finding this hub has proven to be virtually impossible. They are not in stock anymore. No dealership has it. No online dealer has it. I went through the Diesel Place forum. I even called a company that one guy suggested to call for it. I talked to him today and he says, nope, can't do anything for you. And my concern is all this corrosion. You know, that corrosion takes metal away. That metal is there to provide strength. So I'm just a little worried. But hopefully I can find one at a junkyard and get it replaced at some point down the road. For now, I'm not going to worry about it. I bought a needle scaler and a sandblaster to clean this up, restore it, and keep it in good service. So we'll see what happens. Well, I guess I should mention also that when you take these apart, you're going to have that bearing to press out. You're going to have the bearing and then the race that will have to come out as well. And I did buy a press for that. The other important part about this is the emergency brake. This particular truck does not have a working emergency brake. I think it's pretty clear. You can see why. This is, I mean, it's just covered in grease. Nasty. It's corroded. Whoever took care of this truck should be shot, because this is pathetic. These pads on this truck are 9" by 2.5". I'm going to take all this apart, clean all this up, sandblast it. This is the ABS sensor right here. This is the ABS wire. I'm going to clean all this up, and that brake, these brake pads ride inside this rotor. It's called a disc and hat parking brake, DIHPB. That's how it's classified. That is everything I've learned so far about this truck setup. This is a 13,500 pound rear axle. The RPO code that's on the VIN sticker is HD2. That signifies the Dana 13,500 pound rear end. And that's what I used for that. The parking brake in this case is the S-Cam type parking brake, and that is the RPO code J69. So you have to know that as well whenever you go to order parts, because they have a couple different options there. And I think that's it so far of what I've learned. And in case anybody cares to know, there's the GM part number for the hub, GM 151-71667. I used that to try to find a hub, and this has been superseded by another number. But at least that's a starting point. And there's how bad that corrosion is. That's why I worry about this thing. It's just so bad. But I'll clean it up, and hopefully it'll be all right for a little bit. But that's a death trap. That is a death trap. Death on four wheels right there. Okay, so there it is, cleaned up. That actually doesn't look too bad. By the way, that banjo bolt for the calipers is 5/8. All right, so the next mission is to get the rotor separated from the hub. So I'm going to take off all 10 of these bolts on both of the hubs. 18. All right, 18 mil. Good night. 18 mil. Well, that was easy. Wow, look at that. Look at that. What in the world? What is that? Was there actually metal around that? That's now gone? Oh, dear Lord, that's concerning. Should I be concerned? Leave me a comment down below. Would you be afraid? Look at that. Look how, I don't think you can tell how deep that is. Especially here. Like, was that like that to begin with? Was there metal the whole way around here, and this is just now just breaking off? Or is that just corrosion over time that has sat in there and just rotted away? this area right here looks to be quite corroded because of the space around that hole, right? You can see the thickness there, and look at the next one over to it and see the thickness. Wow. Wow. I just don't, that's just, I have never seen anything like that. Look at it, it's just scaling right off. Well, that's probably about the needle scaler. See what we can do. Okay, woohoo, good news. So that Rossini number right there, that's the ticket to getting that hub. I was worried because I called a lot of different people for that hub. I went to GM Wholesale Parts online, I think. I looked there. It says it's discontinued. Of course, this is a 2006 truck, so over 10 years, the part's probably going to be discontinued. So I got a hold of, let me see, right there. Is it focused? Is it going to focus? Man, if that's not focused, it says LKQ Heavy Truck. And they are in Toledo, Ohio. And there is their phone number, 800-537-8690. I called them, and the number actually comes up as driveline specialist. I spoke to the guy and I told him that it was a Rossini number. I gave him that. He says, nope, never heard of it. And I'm like, well, it says Rossini right there. It's got to be, you know, that has to be it. And I told him I had a GM part number as well on the other side. And I gave him that part number, and he did some tapping on the keyboard. He goes, yep, I got what you need. And I was like, hallelujah, he has it. That's the good news. The bad news, I think it was $900. This one is just not healthy at all. It is just not healthy. That's some pretty thin. That is a lot of corrosion, a lot of strength lost, I believe, in my opinion. I'm no engineer or anything, but that thickness equals strength. So I don't want to trust my life and everyone else's life on the road to that kind of, you know, wore out material. All right, I got my little bucket here and some simple green and some water, and I took every bolt, every washer, every spring, everything from the truck so far, and put it in here. What I'm going to do is do a little bit of rust removal. I'm going to clean off the dirt, the grime, and then use some muriatic acid to take the rust off. Ouch, there's a piece of metal. Take the rust off and then have them nice and clean to go back on the truck. And I get my hands clean in the process. That's a win-win. Got all my parts lined up here ready for the acid wash. So we have 16 of the lug nuts. We have 20 bolts to connect the rotors to the hub. And then we have the dowels and the nuts and washers to go for the axle shaft. These 5 bolts are for the parking brake backing plate. That actually holds on the part that you screw the caliper bolts to. And these are the 4 caliper bolts, 4 washers, and that is the spring for the parking brake. So let's get this acid soaked and get them cleaned up. I used a 50-50 solution of simple green and water to get the degreasing completed, and then I'll use maybe like a 60-40 water to muriatic acid solution for the acid bath. There's that, and the acid. I used to use muriatic acid way back in the day when I worked in flooring. This is how we cleaned tile, ceramic tile and grout, especially for around like a pool, a swimming pool. It is nasty stuff. Nasty stuff. Be sure to wear your PPE whenever you work with this. Okay, we'll let that sit for probably 24 hours. It'll work in a couple hours, but I'll keep an eye on it. All right, let's see the results of the muriatic acid. I grew up saying it muriatic, but that's just because I grew up with a bunch of rednecks who probably didn't know how to pronounce it properly. And now I'm a redneck, kind of. All right, so this has been soaking for probably about 14 hours. And yesterday I checked it after a couple hours, and it actually looked perfect. I was surprised by how quickly it worked. But this is the result. It looks pretty clean. It looks like there is a little bit of paint right there that didn't, or some sort of coating. But it certainly took every little bit of rust off of that bolt. Let's check out the big old bolt. There's a spring. Ooh, that water's cold. There's a spring for the emergency brake. There's another spring. There's a washer. That is impressive stuff. All right. Now I'm just dropping the parts into some warm water and baking soda just to neutralize the acid. I don't know if it's necessary to do this, but if that acid keeps on working, could it be detrimental to the integrity of the bolt or the screw or the washer? Not that a washer has that much integrity, but it seems to be further cleaning because all that muck is coming off. Interesting. You can still see kind of a little bit of a color of rust on there. And there we go. Final results with the muriatic acid after about 14 hours soaking in the acid. I checked it after about 2 hours, and this is pretty much how it looked when it was in the bucket soaking. So I think you could probably do this for a couple hours and have the exact same results. But it's just amazing. I don't know if that's dirt or rust right there on that thread. Yeah, whatever it is, it just came right off. So yeah, absolutely amazing. I wish I would have done a close-up whenever they were dirty, but everything is almost like brand new. Quite impressive. So now I'll do the same thing to that and see how I can get it looking. There's the caliper / parking brake bracket. That's the first piece that goes onto the axle. That is after descaling with the little Harbor Freight needle scaler. It looks pretty good. Simply descaling it makes it look really nice. So in all fairness, for the 10-15 minutes that the Naval jelly was on this, it would appear as though it worked in some areas. That is clearly nice and clean. However, that is not. That is not. That's just all kind of clean. Now again, it's only 10-15 minutes, so the bottle does say for heavily rusted things to apply additional coats, but that's work. And with the muriatic acid, I don't have to do any work. I simply dip it, walk away, and come back and it's clean. With this stuff, you have to brush it on and make sure it doesn't dry, and then if it does dry, you have to reapply. And that's just, I'm doing enough work. I don't want to have to do all that. So I filled my bucket up here with some water. I'm going to empty the rest of the muriatic acid into there. I'm going to use the old acid, put it in there as well because it's still effective. I'll go ahead and put it in the bucket, and then we will see how it cleans this up. What's funny is I don't see the reaction that I was seeing. Oh yeah, no, I see it. You can see the little bubbles. Look how green that is. That is really odd. All right, well, we'll let her go. I can see the bubbles working on that stud right there. I think you can see some bubbling. All right, we'll check back. To finish up this day's video, here are all the parts and pieces. Cleaned and painted. Those are the lug nuts. Just painted those. Nothing fancy. I know exactly what will happen whenever I put that impact on, and I'll just blow that paint right off of there. But that's okay. I'll touch it up when I put it on. And here is the hub. All needle scaled. That's about 3 hours of needle scaling to get that nice and clean. This part was not bad at all. It just had like a coating over top of it, a rust inhibitor. But this top part was kind of rough. Wasn't too bad though, by comparison to the other one. Came out really well. Very happy with it. That's 2 coats of that Naval jelly. I don't know. Yeah, I guess it works. But I'm going to try the sandblasting tomorrow. I'm going to sandblast this just to make it a little bit better. And then I'll paint it like I did all these other things. Or actually, no, for this I might just do pour 15 and then top coat the pour 15, because I don't think the old Rust-Oleum's rattle can paint is going to do much on here as far as protection goes. But that's it.